Hello everyone. I just wanted to put this video together and get it out there. So since we were unable to meet and actually talk about the writing assignment, putting this together so that hopefully have a little more information and direction on what it's supposed to look like. So we're doing an introduction this week. Introduction is there to give background information on your topic, what your model organism is, what your molecule you're looking at, those sort of things. It outlines what your unknown or your problem that you're trying to figure out is detailing what your research question, your scientific hypothesis are, and it summarizes your experimental study, your approach that you took to figuring out your scientific question and your hypothesis. Now, it should have a title. It needs to be concise yet descriptive. Right? For the example here, effects of light and temperature on the growth of common daisy Bellis perennis. It tells you what you're looking at, the effects of light and temperature. It's telling you the model and telling you the model organism that you're working with. All right, so we're looking at light and temperature, its effect on growth, and we're working with the common daisy. All right, so that is an example of a good, descriptive, and concise title. Right, it doesn't have a lot of stuff in there it doesn't need, but it tells you most of the information you need to know what the study is about. So when we talk about introductions, we talk about it being starting wide and getting narrow, meaning starting with the most general background first and getting more and more specific about that as you go along. So, for example, in our flowering plants, their growth is dependent on light, temperature, water, and nutrient levels. Right? So we're talking about flowering plants in general. Then we're talking about our daisy. Right? We're getting more specific. Is a flowering plant known as an angiosperm? Right? So we're being a little more specific. And then in order for the common daisy to reach its maximum growth potential, specific light and temperature levels have previously been detected. Right? So that's very specific about our research organism. And we also have a citation there, right? Because this is based on someone else's research that they've already done. And we'll talk about that in-text citation and what it needs to be. So remember, we're going to start vague, become more specific. Right. So when we're talking about, for example, we're working with enzymes, so you would talk about what enzymes are. Right. So what class of molecule are enzymes? Talk about what they do. And then talk more specifically about how different parameters like pH and temperature and those sort of things affect enzymes. Then you might want to talk about the specific enzymes that we used in that lab. All right. So we went from not very specific to much more specific, right? So we're talking about our particular enzyme. You're going to talk about your unknown or your problem, the thing you're trying to figure out here, okay? So daisy growth in response to cold weather and low light are not well understood and require further study. To improve agricultural practices, right, investigation into daisy growth in these environments had to take place, right? So we were interested in this thing, like, can we grow these things in cold weather? So this is what we had to look at. So for all of you, it's going to be based on what you choose to design your personal experiment to do. All right, so the example I have here, we did not test if maltase has the same optimal temperature as amylase. Since it is produced in different parts of the human body, we had to test its optimal temperature as compared to amylase. So in the first part of the lab, you're using amylase, and you're looking at a bunch of the parameters for amylase. And a reasonable question would be, is maltase going to act in the same way? So that would be the problem that you are looking to solve. All right. Then we get into your scientific question and hypothesis. I subjected the common daisy to cold temperatures and light to determine the effects on growth. All right. So, and then I hypothesized that daisy growth would decrease as temperature and light did. All right. So we're talking about, okay, what was your prediction for how this experiment would go? Now, depending on whether it is just you or you worked with some folks on it, you can either go with I or we in this case. And so then we get to the fact that your hypothesis is one of the most important elements. Right? It's usually one sentence, maybe two. You should talk about the variables that you're being studied. So with the plants, you're talking about the amount of light and the temperature. In our case, it might be pH or temperature, those sort of things. And so one or two sentences to talk about that, followed by your hypothesis, right? So what was the prediction that you had for this experiment? And then usually you've got a summary of your experimental experiment or your study approach, excuse me. So we're looking, in this case, growth is measured by weighing daisy dry weight over time. It's going to be specific to your topic. It's going to be like 1, maybe 2 sentences sort of summarizing what was happening in your study. And this blends well into your methods, right? Because remember, your methods are going to be the next section in a scientific paper. So it's just sort of leading the reader into that next section, giving them a very succinct summary of what that's going to look like. All right. And very importantly, we're not going to forget that we need 2 sources in CSE format. So way back beginning, I talked about that we need to have in-text citations. So for each of you need at least 2 peer-reviewed sources for your study. There's a link here for the CSE style guide. It's also in the it's on Brightspace in the writing section. It's also in the rubric for this paper as well. And if any of those don't work, just Google CSE style guide UNE library, and you should be able to get to it. Right? It's got how you would do a citation there. So the in-text citation, so if you had a sentence that came from a particular source, you would have an in-text citation, right? So in this case, McCormack and Kennedy, that's 2 authors. It's their last names and then the year. If you had 1 author, it would just be 1 author's name and then the year. And then if you've got more than 2 authors, it is the first author's last name and then et al. And then the year. In your works cited, all right, at the end of the paper, you're going to have your 2 citations, and they should look like this, right? They're going to be the author's last name, first initial, second initial, all right, commas between different authors. You list them all out. So if there's more than 2, you're not putting at all, you're listing out all the authors. Then it's going to be the year, and you'll notice that there is a period here in between our authors' names and then the year. So that is signaling to us this is a new type of information. So anytime you change the subject, you're going to put a period. So then after the year, another period, then it's the title. Then at the end of the title, another period, the journal that the article came from, another period, and then the volume, issue, and pages numbers for that particular journal, all right? So that's what that part should look like. And so, again, the idea behind this is we're giving you practice on how to do these things. So try not to freak out too bad about it. I think you've all got this. We are looking for you to make sure that you have all the major parts in there, right? We're not looking at so much at the quality of those individual parts, just that you know what they look like and you know where they need to go. All right. So if you have any questions, you can contact me or or your instructor if anyone else is using this video too. And we will be more than happy to give you a hand with any of this. All right. Good luck, everybody, and we'll see you soon.